He didn't just accuse me of cheating, he did it in front of 50 people, under a crystal chandelier, with his voice echoing so loud you could hear the glasses tremble. And beside him, his sister, smiling like this was her victory speech. In that moment, I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a plan. A trap. One they had been setting for months. What they didn't know was that I was already deciding exactly how I would destroy it. The room smelled faintly of expensive wine and polished wood. The kind of place where secrets weren't supposed to spill, only vintage Bordeaux. Candles flickered inside crystal holders, the soft jazz from the corner string trio barely covering the low hum of conversation. It was a perfect evening, until the sound of skin hitting would split it open. His palm slammed against the table with a crack that made silverware jump. The string trio faltered, bows suspended mid-note. Dozens of faces turned, wine glasses hovering in midair, forks pausing inches above plates. She's been sleeping with her trainer. The words hit harder than the slam. They didn't just land, they sank, burrowing into the center of me. For a moment, I didn't move. My breath snagged in my throat. My husband stood there, eyes locked on mine, not confused, not questioning, certain. And then my gaze slid to her. His sister. She was the picture of composure in emerald silk, her manicured hand resting on his arm like she was holding him together. Her expression wasn't pity. It was satisfaction. A slow, calculated triumph. I didn't want to say anything, she murmured just loud enough for the table to hear, but she deserved the truth. Truth. That single word scraped against my ribs. This wasn't truth. This was theater, a public execution staged under the warm glow of chandeliers. I forced my eyes around the table. His business partner arched an eyebrow, the hint of a smirk tugging at his lips. A cousin shifted uncomfortably, gaze fixed on her plate. His mother, usually warm, wouldn't look at me. I could see judgment crystallizing in their minds, hardening into something I would never be able to chip away. I wanted to speak. To shout. To tell them that I had never betrayed him, not once, not in my thoughts, not in my actions. But the weight of 50 stares pressed on my chest until no words could escape. The dinner continued. Forks moved again, though the laughter was gone. Conversations returned, thin and brittle. I sat still in my champagne gown, my hands folded in my lap, gripping the silk clutch like it could keep me from breaking apart. My mind, however, wasn't still. It raced backward through every moment with her. The first time we met, when she smiled but looked me over like she was appraising merchandise. The compliments that always came with a hook. Your hair is so bold. I could never pull that off. The way she introduced me to their friends as my brother's wife instead of by name. The subtle place card switches that moved me further from him at formal dinners. And my husband, how he brushed it off when I mentioned it. She's just protective, he'd say, pouring another glass of wine, never once asking protective of what. But now, as I stared across the table at her slight, victorious smile, I realized she'd been building this moment piece by piece. Not just to hurt me, but to erase me. To make me the scandal, the whispered story passed around in expensive drawing rooms. So I sat there, outwardly calm, inwardly cracking, but not collapsing. Because beneath the humiliation, another feeling was beginning to take root. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't despair. It was something colder, sharper. And before the night was over, I promised myself one thing. If she wanted a war, I'd give her one. Morning light spilled across the duvet like nothing had happened, but the space beside me was empty, sheets cool, pillow undisturbed. No note. No message. Just absence, like trust had gotten up in the night and slipped out without closing the door. I moved through the house and could feel the hushed travel ahead of me, the kind of quiet people use as a shield when they are afraid to look you in the eye. Downstairs, 2 staff members paused mid-conversation when I entered the kitchen. They weren't cruel. They were careful. Careful not to say my name, careful not to be seen on my side of a story that had already been decided in rooms like the one last night. Reputation is currency in our world. By breakfast, mine had been devalued to pennies. I poured coffee and it tasted like metal. As I stared at the cup, a realization settled. The humiliation at dinner wasn't an outburst. It was choreography. The accusation, the timing, the witnesses, the way his sister rested a supportive hand on his sleeve as if she was steadying him against my imagined betrayal. Pieces clicked into place with a cold, methodical logic that felt almost comforting. Grief was wild. Strategy was something I could hold. My name is Imani. I built my design firm from a rented desk and 2 clients into a national practice that put my work on magazine covers and in homes where walls themselves had stories to tell. I married Ethan, a man who built empires with numbers and nerve. I believed in our vows because I believed in the work it takes to keep anything standing. And yet, last night, he didn't ask, he accused. He didn't search for truth, he accepted a version neatly pressed and served by his sister. Lauren had never been sloppy. Her slights were always dressed like compliments. When I mentioned them to Ethan, he'd shrug. She's protective. She worries I'll get hurt. Protective of what, though? His happiness, or her influence? I showered. The water ran hot, the kind that fogs mirrors and loosens the fists you make without noticing. I let it pound against my shoulders until the sting faded. Then I dressed simply, dark trousers, white blouse, hair pulled back, and sat at my desk with a legal pad and a pen. I wrote 2 columns, what they said and what I know. They said I had an affair with my trainer. What I know, I haven't seen him in over a week. He posted a picture from a Tokyo hotel lobby 3 days ago, a neon dragon sign reflected in the marble behind him. I remembered because I'd tapped the photo twice, out of habit, then closed the app. There wasn't time to scroll when your life was already moving too fast. They said there was a photo. What I know, I have never taken a compromising photo in my life. I live in rooms with mirrors. I learned early that reflections aren't always your friends. They said it was the truth. What I know, truth leaves footprints. Lies leave fingerprints. I needed to find what Lauren touched. I called the gym and asked when the trainer last swiped in. The manager checked. Not this week, she said, uncertain, as if the phone itself might be listening. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the city outside my window, glass and steel layered like armor. Somewhere inside that, a hand had placed a rumor like a charge under a bridge, expecting me to walk across and fall. I wasn't going to fall. I was going to map the wiring. I forwarded my calendar to a private email, pulled receipts from the past month, and requested security footage from the lobby of my firm. I wasn't sure what I was looking for yet. Only that I needed threads. The truth doesn't always arrive whole. Sometimes you have to weave it out of what's left behind. By noon, I had a plan written in ink. By evening, I had the first thread. The trainer replied to my message with a time-stamped video from Tokyo, street sounds, a laugh, a neon sign that matched the photo I remembered. You okay? He asked at the end. I typed, then deleted. Then I wrote, not yet. But I will be. Strategy steadied my hands. Silence, finally, was on my side. I started with the smallest thing no one else would notice, a budget line on a foundation ledger. Ethan served on the board. Lauren loved to be seen near its good works. The foundation paid vendors, hosted galas, funded projects with glossy brochures and ribbon cuttings. It also kept immaculate records, records that didn't expect me to look. The report came to our shared inbox each quarter. Most families skimmed. I read. I always had. This time, I opened the last 2 statements and searched for anything that didn't fit the pattern. Vendors that weren't local, services that didn't match events, amounts that were oddly precise. There it was, GEM Collective, LLC, Media and Reputation Support, $11,850. The description didn't match known PR firms. The payment was routed through a discretionary budget Lauren managed when Ethan was traveling. A paper cut of a detail, easy to miss, unless you were searching for fingerprints. I didn't jump. I verified. I called the listed number from a prepaid phone and asked for their post-production services menu. A woman with a polite, unplaceable accent said they specialized in composites, identity replacement, and high-fidelity facial mapping. She said it like she was listing shades of paint. My heart went cold, then steady. A composite is not a photo. It's a manufactured truth that pretends to have a pulse. The next step was unromantic and absolutely necessary. I gathered every image I had posted publicly in the last year. Headshots. Event candids. A magazine cover with a softened smile. I shared them with a digital analyst under a confidentiality agreement, using nothing that traced back to our home. He asked for the alleged photo. I didn't have it. He said, give me a day. He didn't ask for my story. Professionals who tell the truth for a living know that the story lives inside the pixels. While he worked, I revisited the foundation ledger and followed the money. GEM Collective billed the foundation for reputation support twice. Then a different vendor, Solace 8, invoiced for compliance review. New names with bland faces. I pulled filings. Solace 8 had one employee and shared a mailbox with 3 other limited liability companies. The registered agent? A boutique law firm that handled, among other things, family trusts. I was looking for proof of a planted lie, but the documents led somewhere else: leverage. Lauren wasn't just trying to humiliate me, she was trying to trigger clauses I hadn't thought about since signing day. In Ethan's family, prenups were standard, but the details? Subtler and sharper than most. One clause, morals or material harm, stated that a confirmed act of infidelity or public scandal attributable to me could restrict my vote on the foundation board and suspend certain trust distributions earmarked for the mentorship program I had designed for young designers. The clause didn't require a court ruling. It required credible evidence accepted by the board. Accepted by the board. Not proven in court. Not tested by any measure of justice I recognized. Accepted. And who sat on that board? Ethan, 3 senior advisors who'd known him since prep school, and Lauren, who chaired the Compliance and Reputational Risk Subcommittee that greenlit outside vendors like GEM. That's when the analyst called. I don't have the final artifact, but I have a pattern. Someone scraped a high-resolution image of your face from a magazine feature, rebuilt it with a generative model, and composited it onto a body with your skin tone and proportions. The reflection vectors in the pupils don't match the room they claim it was taken in. Also, the shoulder seam on the top you're wearing is from a brand that stopped production last year. He paused. Whoever made it is good. Whoever paid for it is careless. I thanked him, hung up, and stared out at the city until the windows reflected my outline like a stranger's. Humiliation was never the primary objective. The lie was a tool to isolate me, to freeze me out of the one project I loved most, to pull funding I had raised and redirect influence back to the person who believed she owned it. The twist wasn't that the photo was fake. I expected that. The twist was why. This wasn't about Ethan's heart. It was about his signature. And the person who wanted control of it didn't plan to stop at my reputation. She was aiming for the parts of our life she could measure. In votes, in dollars, in doors that open because someone believes they hold the keys. I didn't feel small. I felt precise. Now I knew the shape of the machine, which meant I could decide exactly where to break it. Strategy is only power when it meets timing. The annual foundation dinner was 2 weeks away, and Lauren adored that stage. Tuxedos, photographers, applause calibrated to her smile. She assumed I would skip it, the disgraced wife hiding at home while reputations tidied themselves in public. I RSVP'd attending, then started building a room inside the room. I created a private site with a simple purpose, to let the truth demonstrate itself. Not an expose. A walkthrough. The analyst's report, scrubbed of identifiers, sat behind a QR code. The ledger entries were organized in a timeline beside open-source files detailing what composite vendors promise and how they deliver. I tested it on 2 friends outside our circle, smart, skeptical women who owed me nothing. If you scan this and follow the steps, I asked, do you arrive at the same conclusion without me narrating it? Both did. Both looked up with the same expression. Anger, then respect. This is clean, one said. They can't argue with it without arguing with physics. I chose my armor, a white suit with a clean line and a single strand of pearls that had belonged to my grandmother. No gown, no glitter. A statement of clarity. At the last minute, I added one thing I hadn't planned. A small voice memo Ethan had left on our anniversary 2 years ago, saved without intention. In it, he talked about the life we were building, the way my work changed rooms, the trust he felt when we argued and came back together. I listened once, not because I needed sentiment, but because I needed to remember the truth of the man beneath the noise, so that when the moment came, I could choose my target precisely. My goal wasn't to destroy him. It was to dismantle the setup designed to control him. The Fairfax hall smelled like polished floors and old money. The cameras at the entrance flashed, then moved on. Inside, conversations rose and fell like tides. Lauren, all jewel tones and champagne laughter, occupied the center of a constellation she'd arranged. Ethan stood nearby, face composed, eyes unreadable, until they found mine. A flicker. Regret, maybe. Or surprise that I had the nerve to breathe the same air. Imani, Lauren said, stepping forward as if we were gracious sisters negotiating a seating chart. You look refreshed. The pause before the last word was a knife in silk. I didn't answer. I let silence make its own introduction. People underestimate silence. It forces others to hear the parts of themselves they'd rather ignore. The program began. Speeches, thank yous, a highlight reel of the year's projects. When Ethan took the stage for the annual toast, to integrity, to impact, to partnership, I felt the room align to his voice. That was the moment the lie had misused. That was the moment I would give back. May I add something? I asked from the edge of the dais when the applause faded. Not loud. Clear. An event manager reached for me, then saw Ethan gesture. Wait. I stepped up without touching the microphone. There's been a story told about me, I said, meeting eyes, not all of them friendly, not all hostile, just human, waiting to be told what to think. I'm not here to trade stories. I'm here to show you something you can test for yourself. I lifted a hand. Screens along the wall lit with a single QR code. Phones rose like a field of stars. A murmur traveled as the first pages loaded. Pixel paths. Lighting vectors. Ledger lines. Vendor descriptions. Accepted by the board had always been too small a doorway for a lie this large to walk through. No one moved to stop it. Because no one could stop people from recognizing truth when they built it themselves. I didn't look at Lauren. Not yet. I looked at Ethan. His jaw set. Then loosened. He was doing the math, the same way he did in boardrooms where numbers decide futures. And for the first time since the dinner, I felt something unclench inside my chest. Not forgiveness. Possibility. The room wasn't a stage anymore. It was a lab. And lies don't breathe well under bright, measured light. The sound that followed wasn't applause. It was the low, collective exhale people make when belief rearranges itself. The Foundation's counsel, who had spent most of the evening texting under the table, stood and asked for the MIC. We will need to review these materials, he began, voice practiced. If any vendor retained by this organization engaged in fraud, I supplied, kindly. Practices that misrepresented facts, the board will suspend engagement pending investigation. He stared at the QR code like it might argue back. It didn't. Physics rarely apologizes. Ethan stepped forward. Who authorized GEM Collective? His tone wasn't a husband's anymore. It was a chair's. On screen, a breadcrumb trail waited. The requisition issued by compliance and reputational risk, the approval stamp, the timestamp that aligned perfectly with a week Ethan had been overseas. Lauren's name didn't appear. People who need control rarely write it, but the path routed through her committee, the one she led, the one that requested expedited discretion. Eyes turned toward her as if compelled by gravity. She didn't flinch. She smiled a hostess's smile, the kind that hosts hurricanes. This is nonsense, she said evenly. Anyone with a grudge can build a website. What are we doing? Entertaining conspiracy theories at a charity dinner. I had prepared for that, too. This isn't my website, I said. It's a mirror. Scan it. Check the public filings. Follow the vendor registry. Then ask why a reputation support invoice was paid from a fund earmarked for community apprenticeships. I held her gaze. The apprenticeships I run. Something inside her eyes tightened. Not fear. Calculation. She advanced a step, and for a brief second I saw the engine beneath the emerald silk, the need to be the one who decides where the doors are. Ethan looked between us, the weight of a decade pressing on his shoulders. Imani, he said, my name carrying both apology and the limits of it. Why didn't you come to me first? Because the board could accept evidence without me. Because Lauren built a machine that used you. Because I needed you to see it work. I didn't say any of that aloud. I said, I needed everyone to watch the same thing at the same time. A murmur rose from the back. A donor who'd known Ethan since college said quietly, if this is true, we owe her more than an apology. We owe her a correction. The word landed with a weight I hadn't expected. Correction. It wasn't just about my name. It was about what their money did when they weren't looking. Lauren's voice sharpened. Even if a vendor overstepped, that doesn't change what she did. There it was, the fallback. The accusation she needed to keep alive, because the clause needed breath. There's a photo, she said, louder. Ask her about the photo. Which room, then? I asked softly. If you were there. Which room was it taken in? The question sounded gentle. It was a blade. The composite's lighting mismatch had been its tell. The pupil reflections revealed windows that didn't exist in our home. The analyst's notes, now in the audience's hands, spelled it out. Color rose in her cheeks. I didn't say I was there. I said that there was a truth. I finished. Only it was a purchase. The council cleared his throat. Pending review, the board will table any action tied to reputational clauses. Translation: the machine had buckled enough that no one would let it grind forward without losing fingers. For the first time, Lauren's smile faltered. Her control had lived in rooms where whispers did the heavy lifting. Tonight, the work was out loud, and the room itself refused to carry the lie. I could have pressed harder. I could have played the voice memo from the vendor call, the one where the receptionist boasted about their identity swaps so real families can't tell. I decided against it. Not because I was merciful. Because precision matters. The board had enough to act, and I hadn't come to salt the earth. I'd come to make it inhabitable again. Ethan turned to me. "I'm sorry." He said it like a man learning his mouth again. I nodded once. We weren't at forgiveness. We were at truth. And truth, not apology, was the floor we needed under our feet for the next step I had planned. Because this wasn't over. The lie had a bank account, and I was about to close it. The foundation moved fast once money was in question. Payments to GEM Collective were frozen, vendors reviewed, and Lauren was quietly removed from her compliance chair. No press release. Just the kind of silence that means doors are closing and won't open again. Ethan asked to meet. I chose a small cafe, the kind with chipped mugs and no one who cared who we were. He arrived alone. "I believed her," he said simply. "And in doing that, I failed you." I didn't flinch. "You didn't just believe her, you believed the weakest version of me. The one that could be erased with a rumor." I slid a folder across the table, a prenup amendment removing the reputational clause and securing the apprenticeship fund under my sole authority. "If you want to correct this," I said, "sign it." He read. He signed. No speeches, no bargaining. Lauren left the city soon after, taking her version of events to people who didn't know how lies smell up close. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. I took the board seat she wanted empty and used it to grow the mentorship program. The first group of young designers, bright, bold, unstoppable, walked into studios that had never seen them before. That was my revenge. Not her ruin, but my rebuild. Ethan came to the opening, carrying chairs, staying in the back. He slipped me a note. "Correction is a beginning, not an end." I kept it, not as a promise, but as a record. Revenge isn't about fire. It's about building something so strong the wind runs out of breath. When they try to bury you under lies, make them pay for the soil, then plant your future in it. If this story pulled you in, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And tell me in the comments, if someone tried to destroy your name in public, would you walk away quietly, or fight back in style?